I think for beginners, the enjoyment of that first triathlon has to be central to what they do. It's very difficult, I think, to set too many splits, to be too into I'm going to race it. I think you have to be very, I'm going to learn a lot. I don't really know too much when I'm going to put these three things together and how it's going to come off. What I don't need to do is have pressure to go too fast. So I think they have to put, and it sounds a bit corny, I have to put, enjoyment first. That's why you're doing it. And I think if you do that and you have a sense that the outcome, the time won't really give you any more quality by the fact that it's a minute quicker or it's 2 minutes quicker. It's actually just almost putting a line in the sand and saying, great, I've done one, now I understand what the sport's about and that it is possible to do three things in one day that are entirely different and not to really get ahead of themselves. If you have got an innate talent, it will show up pretty quickly. I mean, without even trying, that person will be in the top 10%. If you just want to get round, you're at the back of the field, fine, you've got round. It isn't, there isn't we don't have like sportifs where you categorize people in gold and silver and bronze. If you complete a triathlon, you're the same as somebody that completed it but won it. You've still completed it. And I think the beginner will love it if they just enjoy the process. Think about later about making that process better. So yes, the run is the last element. The run is important as the distance goes up because when we think about Ironman, and I know that's not necessarily a beginner's starting point, but today somebody's already said, it's my first year, I'm doing Ironman as my first race, so it is possible for people to do it. That distance means that you've got to respect how far you're running at the end of a already long day. And therefore it does come down to crunch time on Ironman distance to be able to support your body for that long and to carry your body over a whole Ironman distance. When you talk about sprint distance, it's not going to be a make or break, because if you've got things wrong, you've got 3 miles to run. If you're a bit tired, you can still run 3 miles, it's just you'll be a little bit slower. And in order to get better at that final discipline, you have to learn pace experience over the first two disciplines. If you go too fast and get to T2 quicker than somebody else, that does not ensure you will finish ahead of them. And while somebody's a beginner or learning how to get better at triathlon, just to get pacing right is the first and foremost thing. And as you learn to pace, you learn to be able to push the run, which is the last element to push the hardest, you get better at that. And I think run sessions that have got a little bit of intensity in them, not all the time, just occasionally, especially as we move out of spring and into the racing season, because that's what's going to happen on the race. The run will be where, in theory, you push the hardest. And I know some people, perhaps they're from a swim background or a bike background, want to push harder earlier, but it's a false economy. You can only really push it to the limit towards the end. And there are more experienced triathletes that know that absolute, that minimum below where they feel they're going a little bit too slow, but they're just right. They're just right to the end. And that takes experience. And if this is your first year of triathlons or you've got things wrong, just look at pacing the bike correctly, because people do get excited, they're on their carbon machine and they're ready to go fast. And yes, you're still only getting yourself to T2 ready to run. And if you have to jog or plod or worse still walk, then that's not been a successful swim bike. It's actually been, a destructive one. There are people that talk about, fastest off the bike. Yeah, but it isn't fastest off the bike, it's who actually can run, not their fastest run, but do the whole three elements and feel like they've done their best. And that cannot be such that you get to the T2 transition and say, I can just basically fall downhill now to the finish, because there aren't races that exist like that. You've got to be able to run competitively in that last element. And pace judgment and a little bit of getting used to pushing yourself hard running. Not much, just a little bit, because it's the one where on race day you will be pushing yourself the most. Worrying about open water swimming is a perfectly logical self-preservation mindset. Absolutely. I have definitely been in that mindset, and a lot of people are often in that mindset. And that's good, because you're not making out that, I'm a great swimmer, I'm not bothered about it. You're in close proximity to other people. You may well be in certainly open water in a colder environment than you've been used to. and you have not got a lane line and lane ropes to see where you're going. So you're in a different environment. Therefore, to get used to that environment, you have to move out of the pool and into an open water facility, a safe facility with other people, just getting used to, dipping yourself and dipping your head specifically in cold water and realizing that deep in-breath that you get from it. Doing that on the race day to make sure you don't get in and expect to swim straight away, but getting used to it, not just by giving yourself 3 minutes before the start of a race. You've done it, I would say, at least once a week, as early as is possible for you to get into open water. Because if you're going to do open water, it's a specific thing. You need to test, you need to try it, you need to work out what works for you. And most people, I would say, get a few races and start saying, actually, I've got it sussed out, I'm not too worried, but I have to get into open water. I can do all the swimming in the pool, but it doesn't give me that experience in open water. As we've spoken about earlier, it's only 10% of the race. But if you hyperventilate, if you stop, if you have to get rescued by the boat, or worse still, you can't finish the swim, then that 10% of the race is absolutely scuppered your day. And people are often able to use their race bike, they're often able to run in their running shoes, but they can't always prioritize getting into an open water environment. I would see that as the most important session to get sorted. Typically starting in April or maybe May, depending on how early their race is. But you can't ignore the fact that open water is completely different to being in a swimming pool. Hence, the open water swimmers are a different breed to people that are good in the swimming pool. And I think, a little bit of confidence, a little bit of race experience, but plenty of forethought that you cannot just think, oh, well, it'll be okay on the day. It's a very scary proposition to have, several hundred or sometimes a couple of thousand people all trying to jump into the same piece of water. That is, it's great scenery for the footage, but it can absolutely just make people's day very scary and very abysmal for 20, 30, 50 minutes of their race because they're very scared. And maybe that's some of the achievement that people get from open water, that they feel that a pool-based event's a little bit of a cheat, and that actually open water is a real triathlon, as I've heard it called. And I get that, because the real triathlons that started 30 plus years ago were in open water. They weren't swimming pools, they were open water facilities. So get experience, get your wetsuit, and make sure that you do get out there in the open water in a safe environment to just get used to what is still not most people's strongest sport, but you can at least get yourself out of the water and onto the bike.